One thing is for certain, I find the whole Tesla story fascinating. This is the new long-range Model Y, by the way. But as I film this in early December 2024, Tesla stock is up nearly 40% this year. They're worth over $1 trillion once again, according to the stock markets, far more than BYD. And the reason I mention BYD is because when it comes to electric vehicles globally, it's kind of a two-horse race. You've got Tesla in one corner and BYD in the other. And on one hand, Tesla still make more electric vehicles than BYD do, but when you add in PHEVs, the game changes slightly. And then you have the Trump effect. So as we film, Donald and Elon are good pals. Everything's rosy, everything's great. And Donald is talking about up to 60% tariffs on Chinese vehicles, which understandably has scared BYD when it comes to America, although they do produce some buses and commercial vehicles in California. However, he's also said that he's in favour of Chinese companies coming to America if they build cars there, not import them from overseas. And if that happens, well, that will probably hurt Tesla because suddenly they'll have far more competition. But it's been an interesting year for the company, particularly the last quarter of this year, where sales are expected to nearly get to 2 million. And this car, the Model Y, was the best-selling car globally in 2023. We're not there yet in terms of the overall sales figures for 2024, but it's probably going to do well for them. In fact, the Model Y is probably the vehicle that is really pushing Tesla on. Yes, there's other models. No one's too excited about the revised version of the Model 3 in terms of sales figures. It didn't exactly go bonkers. Unlike the share price, that if you've had any shares or you've got something in the S&P 500 or you watch the share price even after the US elections, you'll see they're in a very good place. And Elon is still talking about his $25,000 Tesla in the US, which he says year after year, oh, that'll be here next year. And they'll have self-driving taxis and all the rest of it. Not to mention Tesla have Starlink and a solar-powered company. So you would look on the outside and say the future is bright. So with that in mind, if you're considering a new EV, should you buy a Tesla or should you buy a BYD? So the funny thing is, it doesn't really matter. Either cars can be made in China. Not only the case for Tesla, of course, but essentially this car hasn't changed too much in the years it's been out. It's a bestseller for Tesla. It kind of does what it says on the tin. It's a family SUV that will get you around the place as needed, and it's quite efficient. So much so that Tesla say this version of the Model Y will now do almost 600 kilometers on a single charge. And overall, it's very efficient. On the motorway, I've seen it doing 24 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, but equally, I've seen it doing 12 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which is very, very good. Not amazing, but good, because like any EV, as soon as you do motorway speeds for a sustained amount of time, they're going to use more power. And the Model Y, even if it is a long-range version, is no different. The interior hasn't really changed. You can still get these nice white leather seats, although not actually leather. Everything, and I do mean everything, is still controlled via this huge tablet style screen. And in case you're not aware, when you look straight down where you'd normally see a Speedo, there's nothing, but this new white insert that they use is far nicer than what we've seen with the wood effect in the past. There's still dual charging areas for your devices and a great big hole where you can store stuff and cover it away when you don't need it. And of course, there's plenty of room for 3 kids or 3 adults, whatever way you need to configure it, in the back of the Model Y. One of the other reasons you might want to buy a Model Y is because of boot space. You'll fit lots in, and it's got a flexible parcel cover area. So yeah, it's just good if you've got kids and dogs and bikes and all the things the family life brings. They keep offering discounts and financial incentives and low APRs and free supercharging. And once upon a time, the entry version of the Model Y was €42,000. This long-range version is now touching on 48 if you get it in white. So I'm not saying they're going to drastically change the price of the car overnight if you buy one, but they're not unknown to do discounts on cars at the click of a finger. And again, if it means globally, they'll do it globally, whether it's to challenge BYD or just because Elon feels like it. And people regularly ask me on this channel, would I buy a Tesla, or it's always used as the benchmark, the Model 3 pricing when it comes to so many EVs in the market. And there's a reason for that. It's good, it's efficient, and it's relatively affordable for people. One thing that does drive me mad about Tesla, however, is they don't do trade-ins. They'll take your car and give it to a trader, and even when you come to the end of your current cycle in your Tesla, they don't want that car either. They drastically need a proper used network in countries to tempt more people into the product, in my opinion, because you need to be able to trade in your car in 2 or 3 years' time, and that's a factor that will put off some people in buying one, not everybody. This is the German Model Y, and by that I mean it's the one that's built in their Berlin-Brandenburg factory. And there was a lot of talk of, would the build quality get better, would the suspension get better? I can't say I've really had any issues with any Tesla press cars I've had in the last sort of 2-3 years in terms of build quality. Before that a little bit, but I can't say the suspension, in my head anyway, is any better. It's still very, very firm in this supposed family car. While it handles arguably better than some SUVs, the trade-off is definitely felt in the suspension. This is a rear-wheel drive version, and the two quoted figures are sort of 14 and 15 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, depending on whether you're on 19 or 20 inch alloys. However, yes, when it's cold, it is, 17 to 20 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, but if you're taking it easy around town, or your drive doesn't involve a lot of motorways, it's doing better than the quoted Tesla figures, because I've seen 12 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Equally, I've seen mid-20s on 120 on a motorway at a sustained speed. So you will potentially get the 600 that Tesla claim you will. It just will depend, are you doing a lot of motorway driving versus city driving? Because if you do the former, I don't think you'll quite get to that level of range. But I mean, you've got the 250 kilowatt charging speed at the superchargers, which they're not rolling out more locations, but they are doing their best with the ones they have. For example, they're upgrading the Sandyford one in Dublin, where the Dublin showroom is at the moment, putting in more spaces as far as I know, but it's badly needed. It's quite a tight setup there. The straight line performance of the car, never in doubt though. Very, very quick, loads of power. To someone who hasn't been in one of these cars before, they'd probably get in and say, this feels like some sort of a spaceship, and it does. Faint little noise of motor as you squeeze the throttle and propel yourself forward at very, very quick speeds. It's just that very choppy suspension that for me needs to be better. Like the recommended PSI is actually 42, and the car flashed at me to say there's an air issue because they're all at 38. I don't think there is an air issue. It's just someone obviously hasn't totally inflated these tyres to what the recommended is. And I'm fairly sure the difference between 38 and 42 PSI will be felt even more in a suspension that is this firm. Until the 7-seater version of this car comes, this is, for now, still the Tesla that seems to be doing the most sales, seems to be getting the most interest. And to me, and maybe you, it feels like these cars have been around for quite a few years, but I'm amazed by the amount of people that are still double taking at this car and pointing at it and just staring in wonder. Like, there's a Model Y in front of me, 2 cars ahead, absolutely filthy, looks like it gets plenty of use. So they're not a new phenomenon, but there's just something about this company that people are interested in. Some people aren't, but a lot are. For €48,000 in a car that can do all this family stuff, there are cheaper alternatives out there, but you'll probably be able to pick holes at the charging speeds, the efficiency, the battery size. And that's where I still think the Model Y is kind of out there on its own. For 600 kilometer range, or let's even call it 500 on a bad day, at the price point, There's still not an awful lot else out there that can offer you the same package. I just wish, Tesla, you'd sort out the suspension. And as much as the Poolbeg chimneys are a sign that you're home if you're from Dublin, they're also a sign of power generation of old. These chimneys have been decommissioned for quite a few years, and more sustainable energy is something we're pushing towards right across Ireland with a very generous amount of wind production, for example. And that's the point. Tesla, whether you like them or not, Elon, whether you hate him or not, Donald, even, who's now kind of in the Tesla mix, they have changed the world. They've made electric vehicles more affordable, whether it's through discounts or putting pressure on other brands, including massive brands like BYD. And for that reason, it's still hard to overlook them. Not to mention the fact if you were clever enough and wise enough to buy some shares, they probably made you a few quid. So as much as there's plenty of Tesla haters, and justifiably so in the world, when it comes down to just simple economics, they still offer a great alternative to electric cars from other manufacturers with decent range, super fast charging. And I get they're not for everybody, but really, as a product, there's nothing wrong with them. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.